All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Instant Reaction Show. This is Ryan Shumpert. I'm Rick Butler. Tennessee picks up their first victory of the season in the season opener. They defeated Tennessee Tech by a score of 80-42. Ryan, it wasn't necessarily the 90-point showings in the exhibition games. What did you make of how the offense played today?
No, you're right, and it felt like both halves kind of had a similar rhythm to them, where Tennessee came out, struggled a little bit offensively to start both halves, and then into the first half particularly, they got on a roll. Jordan Gainey hit some big shots to kind of, I think, kickstart was the word Rick Barnes used to describe it. Josiah Jordan-James hit a couple of triples as the Dalton Connect, so they got things going. I felt like in the first half when the offense struggled, Tennessee Tech changing defenses, some kind of matchup zones, I felt like that gave Tennessee some issues. They turned the ball over. Second half, when they weren't scoring, it felt more like a product of just shots not going in,
Sure.
and they were getting a lot of good looks. So a little bit of a stagnant or maybe up and down performance from the offense in the season opener. Like you said, not really what we saw to a degree in the exhibitions, but nothing crazy, not a ton that really discouraged me about Tennessee's offensive ceiling this season.
Yeah, you mentioned Jordan Gainey right there. I believe he ends the game with 14 points, somewhere around there. You mentioned kind of the spark that he gave Tennessee. And I think if there's any indication of these three games, the two exhibitions in the season opener today, man, Jordan Gainey might really be able to provide Tennessee a good role coming off the bench. And I think that's kind of what you saw a little bit of tonight, being able to provide that spark.
Certainly, and I think, and Rick Barnes said this post game, they're searching for rotations line. That's going to be a work in progress. Tonight was the first time they've had their full team out there. Obviously, this Kai Ziegler is a big part of that, but they've had a ton of other guys that have been in and out of practice with minor injuries or illness and stuff of that nature. So I think it's going to be a progress finding that. But he mentioned, I think Barnes kind of liked the idea of Jordan Gainey being a guy to come off the bench and have a spark. And we talked about it in our preview podcast last week for the season. You know, what does his role look like with Santiago Vescovi and Sakai Ziegler back? It's hard to imagine in the long term he's starting a six-man kind of offensive option off the bench. It would make a lot of sense.
You mentioned Zakai Ziegler right there. Massive ovation when he checked into the court for the first time. Has not played since that ACL injury back in February. The return has been well documented, right? Through the tournaments last season, through the offseason as well. He gets to come in tonight. That was something that Dalton Connect and Jordan Gainey talked about after the game and the pace of the game moves quicker when Zakai Ziegler's in on the court.
Certainly, and it wasn't a huge stat sheet game for Zakai Ziegler. I think he only played 13 minutes, 3 points, 3 assists. But his intensity, his energy, I mean, you could feel it out there. He's getting under Tennessee Tech guards like he does at a really high level, making life really, really difficult for them. And a guy that wanted to play a lot more than 13 minutes tonight. And again, it was some of those things that Zakai Ziegler does so well with using his speed and quickness to create offensively. Against Tennessee Tech's zone defense, a little bit, maybe not harder, but a little bit more challenging, I guess, to get other guys involved and to use that. So liked a lot what I saw from Ziegler. It was obviously kind of a quiet debut, but not in a bad way by any means.
Yeah, and Tennessee Tech coach, he kind of talked about it after the game. He had a really interesting, really good line, I thought, that kind of summed things up. He said, talking about Zakai Ziegler, he gets to you before you can get to him.
That was a good line.
And I thought that's really kind of telling and a great way to kind of encapsulate what he does bring to the table. Obviously, it's been a minute since Tennessee's seen him on the court, so that was certainly a positive. Dalton Connect, once again, leads Tennessee in points, just continues to be a fluid offensive player.
Certainly, and Jordan Gainey kind of kickstarted that run in the first half, but I'd say Dalton Connect was the best player on it. They went to him twice out of timeouts. They threw him a lob that he finished not for a dunk, but for a layup, and then right out of they call it timeout with 10 seconds left in the half, draws up a play. He gets in the corner, pumps fakes, kind of sidesteps and hits a three. So he did a lot of good things we've seen him do. And again, I think maybe what stands out the most, the way he can get out and transition and score, I think it's going to be big for this team.
A lot of questions throughout the offseason, kind of in preseason right here, about what this team would look like offensively. Defensively, though, you kind of knew what it was going to be. Obviously, this is a Rick Barnes Tennessee team. Holds Tennessee Tech to, 42 points right here today. What did you think of the way Tennessee was able to play on the defensive side of the court?
A lot of what you'd expect. A lot of typical, like you said, typical Rick Barnes teams playing defense against an opponent that was overwhelmed. A lot of turnovers for Tennessee Tech in the first half. I want to say 10 or 11. And then I think maybe the thing that stood out the most to me about defense was the way that Jonas Adu anchored things. I thought he was fantastic tonight. Obviously, we've seen that defensive ceiling for his. It's super high, but consistency was kind of the issues his first two seasons. Obviously, just one game against Tennessee Tech. He had 4 blocks. Felt like he affected nearly every shot at the basket when he was in the game. To me, the question will continue to be how Tennessee's offense and defense tie together. They want to play fast on offense, but they drag these teams, drag opponents into these long possessions defensively. How does that work? How do they find the middle ground? They had the depth. That kind of seems to be what Rick Barnes is pointing to of how those things could work out. But that's going to continue to be really interesting. And it'll certainly be interesting against a Wisconsin team on
Yeah.
Friday that slows down things in the half-court offense and seems like it would kind of play into Tennessee's old school rock fight grinded out style. How does Tennessee try to combat that and what will be their first true challenge in the regular season?
Ryan, a lot of new faces on the court for Tennessee, and I know they played in the exhibitions, but this was the first game of the season. You had Cade Phillips, J.P. Estrella, and Cameron Carr all play between 7 and 10 minutes. You had Freddie DeLeon go for 17 minutes. What did you think of the way that some of those new players played, and did any of them in particular stand out among the rest?
No, not really. I think we've seen a lot of what I expected from them, what we've seen from them in practice. I thought it was interesting, and Rick Barnes said Tobe Walker was down with illness tonight. He played, I don't know how many minutes, some, but not a ton.
Same with Gainey.
And he didn't play fantastic, but that created a lot of run for Cade Phillips and J.P. Estrella. And Phillips, I think, is going to be a really, really good role player for Tennessee in time. I don't know how much that comes this season, but he does a lot of the little things well on the court. And you saw that first possession he's in, he blocks the shot. And he plays with a lot of toughness and energy on the defensive end. Freddie DeLeon, you saw some of that offensive talent we know about. And Rick Barnes talked about they were really proud of what he gave them on the defensive end tonight and the effort he showed. So that's going to be the question with DeLeon, is what he can give them defensively and how does he adjust to the college game on the offensive end. Obviously, we hadn't seen a ton from him in either of the exhibitions. He hadn't played great in either of those games. Not he was perfect tonight. A lot of his points came in the second half as Tennessee was starting to empty the bench. But some more progress and some positive signs, I thought, from the redshirt freshman.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Rick Barnes had a really interesting kind of full thought on Freddie DeLeon's play today. So I encourage you to go over to the Rocky Top Insider YouTube account, where you probably already are right now. Go ahead and look through that press conference and find that quote, because, again, it was good. Any other kind of final thoughts and takeaways from this game?
No, not a ton. Again, good opener for Tennessee. Very low stress.
Yeah.
But I think we'll now learn a lot about this team. I mean, you think early season, a lot of easy games, and Tennessee will get some of those in November, but not really in November. They get Wofford, who's a solid mid-major, will come to here next week. Besides that, the rest of November, it's going to be high-profile games. Wisconsin 3 in Honolulu at the Maui Invitational, and then they'll cap off the month in North Carolina. So a drama-free start for Tennessee, but it's going to get ramped up pretty quickly.
It absolutely is. You can follow all of Rocky Top Insider's coverage coming up this weekend. Tennessee takes on Wisconsin this Friday night. Again, we'll be there covering the whole thing. So until then, that's going to wrap it up for us today. This is Ryan Shumpert. I'm Rick Butler. Thank you very much for listening to the Rocky Top Insider Instant Reaction. Tennessee defeats Tennessee Tech in the season opener by a score of 80-42 right here in Knoxville. We'll see you back for the next one.